I recently started replaying Shin Megami Tensei 5 recently. I personally really like those games, the Persona games, all of it. They're so good. My favorite part about all of those games, which is kind of why I like Shin Megami Tensei 5 more than Persona, my favorite thing about those games is the creatures that you can summon, that you can capture and you can summon, and they've got all this lore, and they've got all these, like, oh, well, this is actually from, Philistine mythology and all of that. So I've decided to do this video today where I go into detail about a lot of these different creatures just to find out their actual, like, real life lore. God, sorry, it's so much fun. I love lore. I love lore. I love looking into these kinds of things. I have it all written down on paper. That was that paper going by there. So we're gonna get into all of the details. Now, if you have played Shin Megami Tensei 5, then you know that there's kind of an order. There's the weaker creatures as opposed to, like, the really high level cool ones. I'm gonna be starting from the weak ones and working my way up to, like, the really cool stuff. So we're gonna start at the very, very bottom of the rung here. So one of the weaker creatures that you encounter in Shin Megami Tensei, and the weaker creature that you encounter in this game is a slime. So they have it categorized as a foul, and its alignment is dark chaos, which makes a lot of sense if you know anything about slimes. If you played a lot of games that have slimes in it, and I'm not talking about the little cute, it looks like it's in a little water balloon type slimes. I'm talking about, like, the gross sludge, the blob type slimes, which are just, they just look real weird. They're real messed up kind of a look. The slime was surprisingly the most different of the 5 that I have thought of today, as all the other ones were like, oh, here's a folklore, or oh, here's a yokai from Japan, or any of this kind of stuff, where the slime, it's not in any kind of weird folklore. It's not some sort of old wives' tale or from a mythology or anything like that. This is just something that just, it came about in the past 100 and some change years from now, where the first time that it was ever actually introduced into literature, specifically, was by H.P. Lovecraft. Now, he didn't refer to them as slimes in his book. He originally called them shaggoths. Shagggoth. Shaggoths. And so that's he's the one that first kind of coined the slime monster kind of a thing, when, within one of his books, which is The Mountains of Madness, The Mountains of Madness is the first book where he explained and described them. They were mentioned in prior of his stories before then, but he had never actually gone into an explanation on slimes, which I will be reading an excerpt from that, which explains exactly how they look by his standard, and it's it's about what you'd expect from a slime. So this is the excerpt here. It was a terrible, indescribable thing, vaster than any subway train, a shapeless congeries of photoplasmic bubbles, faintly self-luminous, and with myriads of temporary eyes forming and unforming as pustules of greenish light all over the tunnel, filling front that bore down upon us, crushing the frantic penguins and slithering over the glistening floor that it and its kind had swept so evilly. Wow, that was evilly free of all litter. I could not read my own handwriting there for a second, guys. But that's pretty much how it's described, which, I mean, most of it was pretty obvious language, but protoplasm is something similar to, like, cytoplasm inside of cells, so it's just like that formless goo that's inside of cells. And then pustules they're pus filled, like, blisters almost. You know what I mean? So, that's his description of them, which they are very large by his description, which is probably more accurate to, like, The Blob. It would be more accurate to the movie The Blob, where it's huge. And I don't know where these penguins were coming into play here, okay? I haven't read it, the actual full-length book, so these penguins are just getting fucking they're just dying for no reason. I don't know what this penguins did to the slime, but that's what they were doing. So that was the first time that it was ever actually put into a medium, the slime. Super, like, it's really cool. I haven't read the Mountains of Madness, but Mountains of Madness seems pretty fun just because of that one statement, that explanation, which I really like the way that Lovecraft explains a lot of his creatures, because it's always, you never get the full idea of what it looks like. They usually always pinpoint specific parts of the creature that they're looking at. So, like, the eyes that were forming and unforming. Okay, well, like, so was it, like, all over its body? Was it in a specific place? It just a big goo thing that's the size of a subway with a lot of eyes that pop, I guess, and are no longer there. I don't really know. It's a weird kind of description. But that's essentially, like, the origin of the slime. So the slime is this huge, like, nasty-looking thing. I'm assuming it's probably like a green goo. I think pustules of greenish light. So a green goo, dark green kind of, ugh. It probably just looks really gross. To imagine it is just nasty. But I would equate it similar to the Blob, even though the Blob was in black and white, so it didn't really have a color in the Blob. I think it was like a black color in there in that movie. Later on down the line of slimes, they eventually in 1947, when D&D first came into play, when the first Dungeons and Dragons edition fully started being printed out, they had a slime within their story, and that's kind of where the slimes took off. So it started with Lovecraft, went to the Blob, and then eventually made its way down to D&D. And now it's in a lot of our different media nowadays. We've got slimes from Dragon Quest, which those are more of the actual, they look like a little water balloon type slimes. Those ones are very cute. Those are very cute slime. They took a nicer spin on what a slime is supposed to be and made that. That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, that's a pretty popular anime that a lot of people are into, and it also depicts a slime. Slimes have become a really big part of the media nowadays, and I would even put it somewhat similar to, like, those, we've been having kind of a squishy craze, like the little stress ball squish things, where a lot of kids are getting super into it, and those are very similar. I mean, they pick up everything like a slime does, okay? They are pretty much the same thing. Those things get dirty so quick, and everybody's going crazy about them. And I would say that's something similar to a slime form, or just actual slime that doesn't have an actual body, and people pull it apart, and they do all the videos over them and stuff. It's the slime craze is a real thing. It's a real thing, even if people don't necessarily know it. People are just super into the slimes. I'm not. I think that stuff is gross. I've never been. It's so nasty. It's so sticky, and it's just it's just gooey. I don't. No. I don't want it touching my hands. I cannot get over it. So that's the first creature, is the slime, which is super interesting to learn about. I didn't know that it came from Lovecraft, or that they originally had been called Shaggoths. But as for it being known any earlier than that, there's really not much that you can even find out about it. There's really nothing. No one ever really came up with a slime before that. So, I don't know how he thought of it. I don't know what he was looking at, what dreams he was having at the time, but he's kind of the creator of the slime, which has made its way into everyone's life, I think, at this point. Even if you're not actively seeking it, you've heard of a slime. Everybody has heard of it at this point. Or the actual slime goo that people play with and stuff. It's a whole thing. On to the next creature that we have on this list, which is going to be the pixie. Now the pixie, I feel like everybody's heard of that. You know, we've got the pixie sticks, the, you know, little sugar packets that people eat, and a lot of that's been inspired by the pixie, the actual fairy. Shin Megami Tensei 5 puts its alignment as neutral. I'm not sure if I would call it completely neutral, but I guess it's depending on how you look at pixies. I see things that are fairies and I think they're evil. I'm like, no. There's too many different forms of, there's too many different things where it's like, oh, the pixie was, you know, like, they're super playful and they'll fucking trip you downstairs. It's like, that doesn't sound very neutral to me. That sounds malicious. But, so it's an old, it's from southwestern Britain. That's originally where the folklore comes from. It's said, and this was specified when I was looking it up. It was said that they love dancing, which makes sense, and wrestling outdoors. Which the wrestling, I'm a little unsure of. I've not heard of pixies wrestling, but I don't know. Maybe they got a WWE thing going on. I'm not 100% sure, but. And specifically outdoors. They don't do that shit indoors, alright? You keep it civil, alright? And then there's some ways that they depict them where there's obviously the classic pixie, where it's just like this little tiny fairy, and they're wearing the, you know, cute little fairy clothes, and they look all cute and stuff. Because a lot of people like to imagine pixies to be like these very cute, like, little people, pretty much. But in a lot of the different folklore, they describe them as having very ragged clothes, very, like, torn, worn out, dusty looking clothes. And they are often they want clothes, like, they want more regal, more beautiful garments for them to wear. So a lot of people will gift them new clothes. They'll be like, oh, here's a little gift, and it's tiny little pixie clothes. I don't really know how they were doing it, but that's what it says. So they were making, like, these little pixie clothes for them, and then the pixies apparently loved that. They were like, yes, we love clothes, we love to adorn ourselves, but I guess they just ruined their clothes so quickly. Maybe with the wrestling. Probably with the wrestling that they're doing. that they're doing in there. And then we have a Mr. William Crossing from 1890 that said that some pixies are said to steal children or lead travelers astray. Still don't know how that equates to neutral. Feels pretty malicious. But I digress. He also describes them later on as not being cursed by God, but not being particularly blessed either. So maybe that's where the neutrality comes from out of them. Pixies are... They're vague enough that there's not too much on them. It's when you start getting into, like, the specifics of it, I guess you could say. Like, they're, oh God, different kinds of fairies that I can pull off the top of my head. Like, for example, this is another creature that's later on down the way, so I won't get too into her, but, like, Titiana, the fairy queen. That's a specific fairy that's kind of, she'll have a lot more information on Titiana, the fairy queen. Whereas pixies, there's really not too much about them. They're just little things that roam around the forest and you know, play around and act mischievous and trick travelers and steal children, I guess. So we're going to be moving on to the next one, which is another really interesting one. I really liked this one. It's called a Preda. It is described as a haunt, so it's a ghost essentially, and its alignment is dark chaos. It's a evil ghost. So they have this evil ghost. It is a part of Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Chinese folklore. So it's got a different. It branches out into a bunch of different, like, religions, myths, that kind of stuff. it is not like it translates to the preda. It translates to hungry ghost. So essentially, it is a person who has who has died recently, who they were overly prideful in themselves, or they were really haughty, or they were mean, or they were just like, in general, just not a very nice person. That person would then be reincarnated into a preda, where they feel like they're hungry all the time. They're always hungry. They're always thirsty. They are always trying to, and they're always trying to like eat something. Like they never feel content in any sort of way. They're always in like this state of like extreme like, it's supposed to be like a suffering thing. So they suffer for the bad things that they were doing when they were alive. So here, yes. So, predas are created after death, and the deceased family has to perform rituals in order to make the preda, in order to allow their loved one who has turned into a preda to pass on into the next life, with Buddhism, moving on to the next life. So their family is a big part of it. Their family has to do these rituals. Their family has to perform them in a particular way, probably with the guide of like a monk or a shaman or whoever it was that they were speaking to, trying to fix this issue. But if that person that died didn't have any kind of family or didn't have anybody that could do that for them, they essentially just remained a preda. They would never change. So it is for an eternity thing. They don't eventually die. They just stay as a preda forever because they don't have any kind of family to do these rituals to help them, because they can't do it themselves, which is actually crazy to me. Like, you have to have family in order to not turn into this, because your family has to do these rituals. That just sucks. That, like, you know, just imagine being just like a regular dude or woman, and your life just hasn't gone super great. You know, your family's all gone. You don't have them around you anymore, and then you die and you're just stuck. That's it. You're just stuck. I guess because it is dependent on if they're like mean people or like overly prideful or stuff like that. Maybe you just have to be humble. You don't have a family, humble yourself, because they're not going to be able to help you afterwards. I don't know. I guess that's just the only other solution to not turn into a preda, based off of what I researched here. So there is also different types of predas, and I'm going to have to look at my book for this one, because they are all described very differently. Okay, so there are the ones that they're the predas that live together. So they're a herd creature, I guess. There's the ones that suffer from constant hunger, thirst, or temperature sensitivity. So they can get super hot on a mild day, or super cold on a particularly windy day. You know, their temperature scale is completely all messed up, so they're always feeling some sort of extremity of some sort, just like this sort of suffering thing. And then there are the ones who have small mouths and very large stomachs, meaning that no matter how much they eat, they can't get enough food into their mouth to satisfy their large stomach. This is just a creature of suffering. Just reading it is, they just suffer all the time. They just have the hard end of the stick. I don't know. And then there are the ones who live and they eat bodies. So they eat like corpses, or some of it was actually even that they would have a craving, hunger-wise, for some strange stuff. So maybe it might be feces, dead bodies, roadkill. I don't know. They would have a weird craving for something very specific that's disgusting in some kind of way, like maggots or something. It'd be really nasty, and it's the only thing that they want to eat. So not only are they stuck with like this super, like this just always feeling hungry all the time, constantly, always suffering, always having these sort of weird temperature shifts within their own body, but now they have to find specific things to satisfy these cravings. It just sounds terrible. It really is a very suffered ghost, I guess you would call it. I guess they'd be considered ghosts since it's a deceased person. And then there are the ones, and this is how they were described, the ones that travel through time and space. So they just, I'm not fully sure what that means. They just travel to like different eras, I guess. Like they go to different time points in it might be 100 years in the future, or maybe it'll be 500 years in the past, or they just travel around like that. But essentially the big thing about it is that these are very pitiful creatures. They are just a suffering kind of entity that their only purpose is to suffer. And I didn't see anything about them actually going after humans or like wanting to like killing humans or anything like that. It's just this weird hunger that they have. And they are described as they're sunken, they have mummified skin, narrow limbs, and then enormously, they have like a disproportionate bellies along with their long and thin necks, which the thin neck is supposed to also be like you can't get enough food into your stomach. You have a large stomach, but you got a small esophagus, so you can't get too much down in there, so you'll never truly be satisfied from eating. It's not, they have this huge mouth and then this like huge stomach. So in that regard, they didn't exactly have the artwork super accurate on Shin Megami Tensei 5 because he has a very large mouth when they depict him. But I suppose he did have a pretty thin neck, so I that might balance it out and make it more accurate. And so that's the whole thing on the Pretas. It's just this hungry ghost that you need to cleanse. And I believe they said that a lot of the monks and a lot of the holy men that believed in Pretas, a lot of them would do rituals for those dead people who turned into Pretas. If like they didn't have like a family, they would do it. They would try to attempt to do it for them. So I guess that's a little bit better. At least they got somebody on their side here, because today, if you didn't have a family, you were messed up afterwards. And that leads us into our fourth creature today, which is the Onmuraki. It is put down as the raptor, and its alignment is Dark Law, which makes a lot more sense if you actually start reading into what they do. So these creatures, they're the form of a bird, but they have a man's face. So they have like a person's face on this bird body. So this is also another deceased person. This is another person that died, and then they turned into the Onmuraki. The Onmuraki are people who did not have a proper burial, didn't have a proper memorial. These creatures will appear before monks who neglect their duties. So any monk that's, I need to do this, but they maybe they shirk their responsibilities, or they don't say the proper words, or they're not working hard enough, they're not doing enough properly the way they're supposed to, the Onmuraki will appear to them. So they'll scold the monks. They'll go and get onto them and say, hey, you're not doing that right. You're not doing that right. The thing about it is when they do appear to them, they imitate the person that they're talking to's voice. So it's almost like this weird kind of your conscience is speaking to you. It's in your own voice, and it's telling you, you're not doing this right. You need to do better. You're shirking your responsibilities. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Get it together. Pretty much. It'll sit there and they go and they scold them about it. And they're described, they have like they're black, they have black feathers, they have bright eyes, and they have a shrill, terrifying call. So they just like do a scream. They just a real loud scream just on the top of their lungs. So they're a Buddhist demon. So these creatures are it doesn't say anything about if they ever move on with their life afterwards, or if doing a proper burial for them would relieve their pain and send them to the next life. It doesn't specify any of that, but we could get into what their actual name means. So On is in reference to yin and yang. So it's the first part of their name. The On is in resemblance to yin and yang, whereas they would lie on the yin part of it because they are a dark, chaotic beast. Mora, which is for the demon Mara, which is another creature that we will eventually be getting into. He's also another one that's in Shin Megami Tensei. And then Ki, which is demon. So it's pretty much like a chaos Mara demon. It's pretty much what that means. So it's, but that's what their name means. That one didn't have too much information on it when I was looking it up. They just reprimand monks that aren't doing their jobs properly. So there you go. And then we get into the last one, which I really like these ones. I mean, I'm sure some people have heard about these ones, and not from Shin Megami Tensei. They're called Kodamas. So they are labeled here as G-rays, and their alignment is neutral, which these ones are actually neutral. I will stand by what they mark them down as in this. So these are pretty much tree spirits. So they're Japanese tree spirits. They are born from trees that have lived over 100 years. And so this tree will have like these little Kodama spirits that sit around the trees, and you've probably seen images of it. They're very cute. They're not as cute in the Shin Megami Tensei games, though. They look a little strange. But I've seen some pictures of them where they have them in like animes and stuff like that, and they're very adorable. They're just like these little ghost things, and they don't really do too much. Like they don't do any kind of harm to people. They don't really do any kind of good to people. They do good to the land. They do a lot of blessing of the land that they're on. So the forest that they live in, they'll bless the land around their particular tree, their host tree, which is good for people. It's an indirectly good thing that they're doing, but it's not necessarily that they're doing it for humans. These ones are held in high regard. A lot of the Japanese people really like them. They, like I said, they don't do anything really harmful. But if a Kodama dies, or the tree that birthed them dies, then all of it dies. Then the Kodamas die, the tree, everything that will die, and then all the blessings of that land will then turn into a curse. So if there's a tree that's been known to have Kodamas in ancient Japan, and you cut that tree down, then you've just cursed your entire village. You've just cursed your entire city. Wherever it is that you're living, you've cursed it, and it will fall. Because now you have done this wrong to these Kodamas when they didn't do anything to you. They were just trying to live their life in their tree, and you went and you destroyed it. So it's a huge thing. It's like it brings on this huge curse, and it says that like your where you live will fail. It will face a bunch of trials, a bunch of tribulations. You won't survive it. Like it'll just mess everything up. So they avoid those trees. You leave that tree alone. If that's a tree where Kodamas live, you leave it alone. That's it. That's their tree now. Now, they are also described as whenever you yell somewhere that's a really open area, maybe it's a clearing or so, and you yell, and then you get that echo that comes back. A lot of ancient Japanese people, they thought that echo was Kodamas, calling back to them. They thought it was the Kodamas that were doing that. And that's where their echoing beliefs come from, like why did it come back? Oh, it must have been a Kodama. So there's a Kodama somewhere in this region. We now know. Now the Kodamas, they're a bigger part of our actual, media today. Like, there's a few different animes that have kodamas in them. There is a lot. Like, I don't think that everybody will have heard of it, but definitely there's going to be some people that have heard of the kodamas. And they're really cool. They're probably one of the cooler yokai that won't just, like, kill you and murder you. They just put a curse on you if you mess with them, which I totally get that. Curse those people. They cut down your tree. Get rid of them. But that's the 5 that I had today. I love going through and learning more about these creatures, more about this lore, all of the actual in-depth stuff about them. They're so cool. And they do a pretty good job in Shin Megami Tensei of explaining and giving a really good summary of them. Once you start getting into, like, the gods and, like, the really big, like, demons and that kind of stuff, they're gonna start getting really... It's gonna get way more detailed than it was now. With these ones, these are kind of, like, lesser little creatures that they have, so there's not too much about them. It's just, this is kind of what they are, this is what they do. Bam. You know, and it's, you know, you can't really find where they all came from because they came from so long ago. It's not like some guy just is like, yeah, he's the first one to ever mention it. It's like, no, it was a widespread thing within these areas, especially the yokai stuff. It was a widespread thing within those areas that they believed that they believed it, and that was just how it was. So I'll be getting into my next video probably pretty soon, trying to get some more of these down. This is so fun. I love doing this kind of lore stuff. And I will be seeing you guys again.